that are also going to happen to line up well against Elspeth.
All right, well, we are underway for our match here. Jim Davis on a 5-card mulligan, William on a full 7. But Jim is on the draw, so he'll just be down a single card as we go ahead and start. William on Temple of Plenty. We'll go over to Jim Davis. Starts with Mystic Monastery. Just lands trading on the first few turns. We do see at least one copy of Siege Rhino in William's hand. Rhino, one of the better cards against Jeskai aggro.
Though, it looks like William has a hand without green mana. Or
Yeah,
excuse me, without black mana?
I believe so. He does have Thoughtseize in hand, which is not being cast.
No third land.
Yeah, and missing on his third land, he'll pass back. This is a great opportunity for Jim. He made Soulfire Grandmaster on his second turn. Well, William did keep a 2-lander with Courser of Kruvix in his hand. And this is a real punishing one. Goblin Rabblemaster is the play for Jim. And William will need that Courser immediately.
One of the last cards left in Jim's hand is Valorous Stance. So he's got the Courser checked. Thoughtseize is no good here. And Jim, even on 5 cards, may just be able to run away with this.
Yeah, and what looked to be a great opportunity for William may be over as soon as it started. Goblin Rabblemaster, one of the, if not the most punishing card, it's one of the most punishing cards in the format.
It's so rare we get to see it just run away with the game, but here we are.
Yeah, it looks like it may do just that. William discarding BioBlade for the turn. That's the second time he has missed his land drop. And yeah, you see the rest of the hand. Doomwake Giant, Abzan Charm, Thoughtseize, Siege Rhino, a whole bevy of black cards.
Surprising to see William discard the BioBlade there. I know he doesn't have any black mana right now, but there are 2 copies of Urborg in his deck. And if he draw, I just had to imagine he has cards in his hand that are worse than BioBlade.
Thoughtseize, for example.
Yeah, you can't even cast Thoughtseize.
You're never going to cast Thoughtseize.
And Urborg gives William a shot of casting that BioBlade, maybe catching back up.
Well, a swing for 10 from Jim, or of 8. Yeah, of 8 from Jim will put William down to 9. Jim will gain 2, and he'll have lethal on William as soon as next turn. Second Soulfire Grandmaster for Jim. Draw for William is not a land, and we'll be on to game 2 very quickly here.
5-card hand, but Goblin Rabblemaster on check makes very quick work of people.
Yeah, one damage curve on that card so high, 1 into 6. Yeah, 1 into 6 into 8. So unchecked, it's 15 damage just by itself.
Not too shabby.
No, very powerful. All right, at this point, if you're Jim, do you? I guess because William discarded the BioBlade, you know the story.
He's playing Abzan midrange most likely. Maybe Abzan aggro, but that hand would have probably been able to cast something if it was Abzan aggro. Police main line, a ward in the first tree, something like that.
If he didn't discard the BioBlade, I guess the odds that he's on Devotion are still very small. Devotion would always have a play on the first 2 turns.
Yeah, I would say that I would be pretty certain he's Abzan midrange.
All right, so based on that, let's look at our sideboards. Jim, assuming that they both know what the other person is on. Looking first at William Barlen's sideboard. He has 4 copies of Drown in Sorrow. It's not terrible. Jim plays some number of X2s. 3 Abzan Beastmaster, that'd be for a different matchup. Abzan Charm, Whispered Elemental, Thoughtseize, Garruk Apex Predator, End Hostilities, Valor Stance, and Banishing Light.
I think Banishing Light and Hostilities and the 4 copies of Drown in Sorrow are all pretty solid here. Whispered Elemental is not bad as well.
Yeah, certainly. How do you feel about this? Is an interesting matchup. How do you feel about Thoughtseize in this matchup?
Not a big fan. Jim's deck is pretty redundant, and the light total definitely matters. I'm not a huge fan of it.
I know as you go into the sideboard, sometimes if you treat it like a red-white aggro deck, sometimes in the sideboard these decks can get very heavy on card advantage cards like Outpost Siege or bullets like Stormbreath Dragon. In those situations, sometimes Thoughtseize can be good here, but I'm not positive he knows everything of what Jim's doing.
I can see leaving in a couple copies, but it's also not something I'd be going out of my way to play either.
Certainly. Looking at Jim's sideboard,
he's got 2 copies of Ashcloud Phoenix, a Treasure Cruise, 2 copies of Erase, 2 copies of Glare of Heresy, 3 copies of Disdainful Stroke, 2 negates, a Valorous Stance, and 2 copies of Anger of the Gods. Valorous Stance is great here, as are the negates. Disdainful Stroke's pretty solid as well. I think Ashcloud Phoenix, Treasure Cruise, and Glare of Heresy are all in the maybe come in, maybe don't sort of territory.
Yeah, a lot of options in the sideboard for Jim here.
Yeah, I do definitely. Valorous Stance and Disdainful Strokes are great against Abzan, however.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, game 1, there is an issue that Siege Rhino can do a lot of damage to this strategy, and resolving it and killing, even when it resolves and you kill it with something like Valor Stance, you're still drained for 3 life. I mean, Disdainful Stroke is clearly the most elegant answer to the card.
Yep, and the Valor Stance is such a huge upgrade for decks like Jeskai aggro because Siege Rhino is a big problem for these decks, and before they'd had to bring in Glare of Heresy, which against the average build of Abzan just doesn't have that many targets. The fact that Valorous Stance kills Siege Rhino kills Corsair Crewfix, and still does other stuff in the games where neither of those cards come to bear from the other side of the table, it means it's just a big upgrade for the main deck and the sideboard of decks like Jeskai Aggro.
Yeah, I mean, they're really, as far as white permanents go in the Abzan mid-range deck, it's Siege Rhino and Elspeth and Banishing Light.
And Elspeth is not, having
That's not
Glare
great,
for
yeah.
Elspeth is not really what you want to be doing. That's definitely the type of threat where you want Disdainful Stroke.
Yeah, in control mirrors, that's a fine answer. I think in the Abzan mirror, for example, that's fine. You have Glaring and Elspeth, but when you're in Jeskai Aggro deck, the damage of making 3 1/1s is already done when it happens.
Seek of the Way, Soulfire Grandmaster, Goblin Realm Master, these are cards that don't like playing against 3 tokens. So I don't think you really want to bring in for Elspeth, and they've only got the 4 Siege Rhinos, so Glare is, it still comes in a good percentage of the time because Siege Rhino is so good, but you're so much better served having cards like Valorous Stance and Disdainful Stroke that are flexible and still answer Siege Rhino.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll see that. A lot of times you do see in the Jeskai Aggro decks too, them get away from cards like Rabble Master after game 1.
Yeah, although in this matchup, I think Rabble Master probably still stays in. There's only so much Jim can do to sideboard against Drown in Sorrow because he's got so many threats that get caught up in it. So
Yeah.
I think Rabble Master probably stays in, especially since, these decks now, these Abzan decks, they don't have Sylvan Caryatid. I do have Valorous Stance that check both their Corsair Crewfix and Siege Rhino. So they are under a lot of pressure to have a removal spell for Goblin Rabble Master. These decks aren't quite as good as they used to be at about playing through Goblin Rabble Master because they don't have a good blocker in Caryatid, and the other blockers they have access to are much more likely to die than they used to.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Sometimes you see them get away from. We'll see what he gets away from in what he sides out. Maybe Soulfire Grandmaster in the matchup. I guess things that get blanked by Corsair can be difficult.
Yep. I think Seeker of the Way is pretty low impact.
Yeah,
Because even with a spell, it doesn't attack through something
Through
like
Corsair.
through Corsair. Seeker of the Way, if the game drags out, can be very potent. Sorry, Soulfire Grandmaster rather. If the game drags out, it can be very potent.
Its activated ability does have text on it.
Yeah.
We're underway for game 2. William will be on the play. He's keeping on 7. Go over to Jim. Remember, Jim won game 1 off a 5-card hand. William sticking on 2 lands, getting Goblin Rabble mastered very quickly.
We've seen some impressive comebacks from Mulligan. Jim just winning on 5 cards. Danny Jessup on 4 cards earlier today. Tom nearly winning on a 5-card hand earlier.
Mulligans really have not slowed players down today. And we are underway. Both players this time on 7. William Barlen, Abzan midrange on your right. He starts out with a Temple, this time keeping on top his land in much better order. And what appears to be a pretty big control hand. 2 Doomwake Giants, Drown in Sorrow, End Hostilities, and lands. So we go over and we get a look at Jim's hand. Starts out on a Temple. He has kept Rabble Masters in. He has Rabble Master, a white 2-drop, it looks like. Certainly could get caught by this Drown in Sorrow.
Definitely. It's hard for his deck to avoid. He's got so many 2-toughness creatures. Now, he does have negates as well as a sideboard, so he might be able to play around it, but it's going to be hard. If William has Drown in Sorrow on the play, it's going to kill at least one thing, and will often be better than that.
Yeah. Another scry to the top for William. The draw for Jim is Soulfire Grandmaster. Does have turn 2. Gonna make a 2-drop, Scrax Flooded Strand. So he gets to make 1 2/2. I guess the test for Jim will be to see whether or not he's willing to commit that Rabble Master next turn into the board.
It depends what William does. If William just plays a land and says go, it starts getting a little suspicious, but Jim might just have to cast stuff because you can only play the game for so long here.
Until William just starts Siege Rhinoing you.
Right, or Elspething you. Now, the other side of it is also that Jim has Treasure Cruise in hand, which gives you a weird incentive to be a little bit more aggressive playing the sweepers. Because,
yeah, you can recover.
Yeah. You just get them their mana later on in the game.
Yeah, Soulfire Grandmaster for William. It's just a 3rd land. This one's Sandstep Citadel, so it comes to play tapped again, but now William on all his colors of lands. Jim will get to swing in right here, and this is the test. Yeah, does he play this Goblin Rabble Master? He has picked up some other good cards. He picked up a Sarkhan the Dragon Master that turn. The Dragon Speaker, rather.
Yep.
He only talks to dragons. He doesn't control them. Dragons are very powerful creatures. And it looks like he's going to go ahead and go for the Rabble Master line.
I don't mind it here because if you just move into combat and don't do anything, then William might just go, all right, here's Bile-Blight. You use your entire turn. And if William untaps and drowns you, it means that he's not casting a Siege Runner or anything else. And the opportunity is there for you to play Treasure Cruise at the worst next turn, assuming that you have an untapped land. So he's got a consolation prize even if he gets hit with the worst possible card.
And will be Rabble Master. That swings in for 3. William taking damage down to 17. And we... Looks like what'll be a Drown Syro. The draw for William, not too bad. It was a Siege Rhino for the turn. But getting the 2-for-1 off Drown while he can. Courser of Krufix was the Scry. He'll keep that on top. Plains, and we are back over to Jim. Remember, William's hand, End Hostilities, 2 Doomwakes, a Siege Rhino. And it looks like another Drown in Sorrow.
And this is another reason to cast the first Rabble Master here is if you have a second Rabble Master, you care even less about Drown in Sorrow.
Sure. So Jim playing second Rabble Master, playing another tap land. He passed back. The draw for the turn was Courser. And William, he's just going to... I was wondering if he'd play that Drown. He's going to go ahead and go for Courser, try to get that land, and he does. It's Windswept Teeth. And Temple of Malady on top.
High risk, high reward play right there.
Yeah, that one's really going to pay off. So we'll see whether or not Jim could... I suppose he could offer a trade.
Well, if he had land number 5, he could have just gone Sarkhan minus
and
on
then
your Courser.
That's actually very powerful, but he looks like he does not. He drew Seeker of the Way for the turn. So without the 5th land, Jim has to sculpt a different game plan.
It's possible it's just casting Treasure Cruise here. Attacking with a Rabble Master and your tokens and drawing 3 cards.
Yeah. Helps him restock. Does give William some time, though. Though you're right, still may be the play. And he's going to go ahead and make the Goblin and swing the whole team. We'll see. William has choices now. Can trade with Rabble Master or just kill a Goblin. And he'll go for the trade.
And this makes it even juicier here now for Jim to cast the Treasure Cruise. It's 1 mana cheaper, so he may be able to follow up with something. On top of that, it means that Sarkhan can just go on the offense here.
Yeah, William, before the Courser goes away, he's going to go ahead and crack a fetch land. So that he gains the life. There's the Plains, and now they trade 2 more damage to William, puts him down to 15. And you're right, that is the 5th card in the graveyard for Jim. He does not have his next land, but he does have the Treasure Cruise, as you mentioned. So now if he does Treasure Cruise, he has 1 land up. There's a chance if he finds an untapped land off that cruise, he can play a post-combat 2-drop. Looks like instead he's just going to go for Seeker of the Way. He does have Disdainful Stroke in his hand that he's left up.
And he saw Elspeth on the top of the deck there, so I think that's part of the reason.
Yeah, he knows that there's an Elspeth. What I like about William here is that Doomwake Giant got very relevant with how he played the last turn.
But I think that Jim's starting to just kind of pull ahead with these tempo exchanges now. He has the opportunity to Disdainful Stroke this. That's another card in the graveyard. If he finds an untapped land number 5, then he can play Sarkhan. If he fails to do that, then he can just Treasure Cruise.
Yeah, we'll see if this resolves. Doomwake Giant is attempting to be cast here. Do you see a world in which Jim doesn't Disdainful Stroke this?
Well, I think he wants to hold up the Disdainful Stroke for the Elspeth. The problem is the Doomwake Giant just does too much damage here. It checks the Seeker of the Way and all the other tokens are dead, so I don't think he has a choice.
And comes to the same conclusion. He's going to go ahead and Disdainful Stroke it. Draws for turn. It is Stoke the Flames. Does have double red, so it's not uncastable. But may not be the card he was looking for. Certainly not the land he may have wanted. Remember, another Doomwake in William's hand as well as Drown in Sorrow. I suppose if William wanted to play around Disdainful Stroke, he could have gone for Drown in Sorrow, but then again, it's equally likely that Jim has Negate.
Or something like Lightning Strike, just something to trigger the Seeker.
Sure, no, yeah.
Like at some point, if Disdainful Stroke's in Jim's hand, you just have to push through it because William's hand is so jammed up.
So many 4s, yeah.
Right, it's going to be his turn at some point, so I think he's better served just getting it out of the way now.
And he'll go ahead and main phase, Stoke the Flames right at William. That William goes down to 11, then takes 5 damage. That puts him to 6. Jim gains 3. And with Sarkhan in hand, that's a pretty strong move there from Jim.
Yep. And even if William has the untapped mana for Elspeth, again, the door's open for Sarkhan to maybe finish off the game.
Yeah, draw was Hero's Downfall. William goes for Siege Rhino. Puts him up to 9. Being very, very cautious with his life total. It does seem now, William heavy on sweepers, but it almost seems like he has a case of too many sweepers right now.
Yep. And well, the part of the problem is his hand's just so clunky. These are spots where the deck really wants to have something like Murderous Cut, something to break serve with.
Yeah, Glare of Heresy takes care of the Siege Rhino. A swing for 5 will put William down to 4. We'll see if Jim goes for that. He has a Soulfire Grandmaster still in hand. Remember, Sarkhan will deal 4, so a lot of pressure on William's side.
And I think part of the logic for not playing that Grandmaster there is, Williams under a ton of pressure, probably needs to play a sweeper here anyway, so you want to save it. Also, you can get to the point soon where you're starting to rebuy spells.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, this looks so tough for William. The difficulty is that Sarkhan is lethal, and as soon as Jim hits land number 5, and it's not like that equation is changing anytime soon.
right.
It's not that Jim doesn't have any life gain in hand. William goes for the Drown in Sorrow to get the Scry. And Soulfire Grandmaster the draw for Jim. William gets to survive for at least one more turn.
I think Jim's just likely to cast both of them.
Yeah, he has 2 Sargons, it looks like, in hand. So as soon as that land shows up, I have to think one of those Sargons will get across for 4.
This has been a pretty torturous game here for Jim so far. He's had basically lethal in his hand for a little while now, just waiting for land number 5.
Absolutely. So it's going to be Soulfire Grandmaster number 1. We'll see if he goes for number 2. And he does.
I just like casting them both.
And it's going to have to be End Hostilities from William. Needs a card that can take care of them both. Draws Corsair for the turn. That is some life gain. But Stoke the Flames from Jim will do it. It's not the land, but it's 4 damage and 2-0. Jim Davis improves to 5-0.
Williams' hand just a little too clunky there. Even with all the sweepers there, it was just, he was never in a position where he was doing 2 things in a turn, where he was doing something proactive while containing Jim's board, and there's only so long you can defend yourself like that against a deck like Jeskai aggro.
Yeah, well, despite having cards like Corsair, I mean, he had a lot of removal, enough removal really for everything Jim did, but he had 2 threats, Corsair and Siege Rhino, and Jim was able to pretty cleanly answer both those, and after that, it didn't seem to matter much that William had all the removal.
Not really, no, because you're going to be taking these chip shots along the way. The deck doesn't gain that much life outside of the card you just mentioned, which he only found 1 copy of and Jim was able to handle. And every turn you're taking 3-4 points of damage, it's very hard to stabilize.